Greetings and welcome back. Today, I think it'd be an understatement to say I'm joined by an elusive guest. No, instead, I'm joined by a veritable legend of the manosphere of MGTOW, in particular, Spetsnaz. Many people have asked about Spetsnaz, what happened, why his channel disappeared. And I think today, if you're curious, you'll receive some answers to those questions. So I guess the big question, well, is Spetsnaz. One day there was a channel, even though it wasn't active, and then the next day it was gone. Nothing was left. And I remember when I had heard about that, and everyone, I saw messages in the comment section, probably dozens, maybe even hundreds over time. What happened to your channel? What happened to everything? So, yeah, I guess that's the most, well, the burning question. What happened? Why did you leave? Etc.
Sure. Well, it's a pleasure to, pardon my voice, I was screaming all last night at a rock concert. Thank you for having me on your channel. Yeah, it's been interesting. I've been away for quite some time. I think it's been a couple of years by now. But it seems like a lot has changed. I hadn't watched any sort of, I guess, what you term manosphere content in quite some time, maybe going on 3 years. Yeah, I mean, I relocated, started doing my own thing and all the rest of it, but it's only recently I started coming back online, and I was watching a political channel, and then that particular content maker made a response video to someone. It says, and I came across something called the black pill,
Mm.
and that caught my interest. I'd never heard of that before. I thought,
Late
what
to
is
the
this?
party.
Very late, it would seem. But it fascinated me, and I won't name his channel, so I haven't asked his permission to do it. But it just fascinated me, and his life story fascinated me, and his insights were just I thought quite extraordinary. And it seemed to mirror a large number of men, especially over the last few years, men that I've interacted with, who they've found themselves in this position. And I'm not just talking about the dating market or relationships or anything along those lines. It's the whole thing. It's men really are having an awakening, and these are guys from blue collar, every walk of life you can imagine, and they're dealing with these issues, and they're reacting to it, and they're talking to each other. And I've never seen men at any point in my life ask questions like they're asking now about the way that things are, about you know the, all these issues that men face, all these toxic messages that they receive, how they've basically been whipping boy and been the kicking boy ever since they were kids. And conversely, I've never seen women jump up and down and scream more than they're doing right now. And it seems like this real tidal wave of just convergence of circumstances that I'm just seeing ebb out in all these different social groupings that I'm part of. So yeah, I found that absolutely fascinating. So that sort of drew me back in. It sort of reignited an interest. But yeah, I'd say that there were a number of reasons why I left. I get I came to a conclusion as, and it's going to sound odd, after the work that I've done, but was I really helping men? And in a number of ways, I knew that I was. But also conversely, I felt that I needed to take accountability for things that I'd said, and being potentially part of something that may have been maybe just due to the anonymity on the internet, or the way that things are structured online that I wasn't familiar with. It was I keeping men in a sort of a holding pattern rather than actually helping them progress. I think was I feeding something that was keeping men in this state where they weren't progressing? And I saw your most recent video, where you commented on sort of the state of the manosphere and all the rest of it. You gave a good summation, just sort of touching on those elements. And yeah, I mean, in terms of men reaching their own potential, not anybody else's, but in terms of how men, term or direction, how they view their life and their purpose and their value and all the rest of it, not dictated by anything else. But was I preventing that in some way? Because online, I mean, we know it can become quite an echo chamber.
Mm.
I mean, the positive, it's helpful to, as a place to find a degree of acceptance and to acquire knowledge and shared experience. But equally, it can become a funnel of negativity. So I had a lot of questions about that, and there's a lot of toxic stuff that was being directed at me, and I was getting messages that were quite hateful. So there were a lot of things that sort of funneling into that, and I was thinking, do I need this at this point in my life? I know there was a lot of sort of negativity online with potential doxing or actual doxing. I know you received some. I know that Baba did. I know a few other people that I'd talked to as well, and it didn't seem like that was being addressed. So I didn't see anybody tackling that, and a lot of people that I was talking to at the time just sort of dropped off the radar. Of course, I did the same thing, so I can't criticize, but I can understand why. They just want to take a break.
Mm.
So
Yeah. I think there are a number of factors there. I mean, your content was very much known for being, I guess you could say, visceral and tapping into some really raw, emotional, primal stuff. And I
sure,
think on the question of whether you thought you were helping men, because of the time gap, things are different these days, obviously. But the reality is, back in the day, and I'd consider you an old timer too, that the kinds of things you were talking about, being able to sort of tap into the emotional recesses of the male psyche and to really just put across a sense of I can relate to that. And I think that was something that a lot of people felt resonated with your work.
sure,
Because in today's world, probably less so, but certainly back then, even my own awakening, if you want to call it that, a lot of that was characterized by simply recognizing that I was not alone in my thoughts about myself and women and things of that nature. And in particular, in addressing male suffering and hardship and difficulty, that was something that was addressed even less. And so you tapped into a certain component of that, and I think that definitely was helpful. But like a lot of things of that really primal aspect of things, it can become. I hate to use the word toxic. There's so many words that you can't use anymore because they've been sort of corrupted. Toxic, because what happens is it's almost like a drug addict that's returning for their hit. So it's like I need to get my kind of raw Spetsnaz hit, and it becomes
sure,
a regular thing, and then almost a sort of dependency. This isn't necessarily unique to that, but because you almost uniquely tapped into that raw emotional aspect of things, it was a little bit different than somebody who, I don't know, needs to watch his daily or weekly prank video or something. I'm not comparing the two by any means. Just saying it's a different feeling. And of
sure,
course, what goes along with that, what accompanies that, is a lot of intensity of feeling and emotion. And so you're going to get some of the most visceral emotions and feelings possibly directed at you because that's kind of what you're tapping into to begin with the message you're putting across. I don't think I definitely think you were much more helpful than harmful. And I've thought about this myself. The reality is, you try to do what you can, especially if you want to help men, but there are going to be some people that either misinterpret what you say or just, as I've increasingly become aware over the years since I'm the fossil here, that oftentimes, and this is generally applicable to content creation, but specifically here, you'll have people who are not even listening to what you're saying. They go in it's almost like they have a movie reel in their heads, and they're just and what you're saying is not a it doesn't really parallel what they're saying, but they're just hearing something completely different. And
Yeah.
because of that, you're going to get this distortion. Um, I see it all the time, where I make a video. I make a video talking about bananas and oranges, and the guy is ranting on about steak, bread, and koala bears. It's like, no, I wasn't talking about that. And so I think that that's part of it too. And when, especially in the murkier areas where you were going, of that sort of raw primal emotion, people are just gonna almost feel what you're hearing rather than listen. At least that's my interpretation of how that might have ended up happening with you.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're talking about that. I mean, I always reiterated that I never said anything that men didn't already know. But all I was doing was saying it's okay to have those feelings. It's okay to have those experiences, and it's okay to state them out loud. It's okay to state that you have value, that you're not prepared to compromise, that you're not going to sacrifice your self value or your needs and desires for somebody else. You've got to put yourself first. And all I wanted from men was that to have compassion for themselves, to be kind to themselves, and to be open with themselves. So embrace all of that, embrace their needs, their desires, but also their weaknesses, their biases, all like everything. Just encapsulate everything and accept it.
Yeah.
Because men have to be open and kind with each other, with themselves, because people won't be. They're always going to be on that receiving end of it.
Oh yeah.
I know. I know with a lot of guys today, it's like every time they put their head up, they just get kicked. And that's what they're stating. I mean, it's things aren't getting better on that front in terms of how men are perceived. It's in a lot of areas it's getting worse, and I see it in different workplaces. I see it in different dynamics and all the rest of it. And there's a lot of men out there with a lot of resentment, and rightly so. I mean, there's a lot of valid reasons as to why. I mean, their trust, and a lot of times their rights have been violated. So we're living in a pretty unstable society at the moment. A lot of men have been lied to. So I mean, that's continuing to escalate. So men they've been shut off, they've been cut off. It's a pretty toxic, harmful environment with really very little perceived rewards or incentives. So you can't blame them in a lot of ways.
No, I don't. But there are differences, I think, between, as I mentioned in that video, sort of then and now. I think that back then, I'm not a fan of this word, but it was a quote unquote more hopeful awakening. The idea that you could learn these things, you could be angry, you could be upset, but at the end of it, if you could somehow come to terms with the worst of it, you might be able to forge a life for yourself on your own terms. But the difference these days, as I point out in this video, is that um, there's no launching point. It's sort of a tunnel with no light at the end, I think a lot of that just has to do with raw numbers. I think a lot of that is just, of course, more people are in the world, more people are online, and the manosphere message or whatever is it's just bigger. And of course, there are these new terms like FA or and it's I think in a way we were just kind of in a smaller part of the world in some sense, and just that if people were more receptive to a more hopeful message, it had a lot to do also with generational stuff. I mean, think about these days, these guys who get all hung up on sex and become obsessed with relationships or their lack thereof. A lot of that is just, well, I mean, I know you're not as old as I am, but I mean, Tinder wasn't around back then. Tinder is sort of
No.
like the epitome of, sexed up society, literally just swiping, like, bang or not, swipe left. I don't even know how it works. I've never used it. But point is, I hear about it, right? And
Sure.
that that is just a huge thing. And
Mm.
then the similar attitudes coming from that with online dating, even if it were or used to be a little different. So I'd say that however sexed up society might have been, and it was to some degree, it's that much worse. And so young guys in particular are losing track of all the things that they could do that have nothing to do with women. And the reality is, there's always some potential to do something, have some interests, some hobbies, some talents, whatever. And then they become, I've seen this time and again in recent years, so bogged down that they're not even asking themselves what is still possible to do. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, they have rotten luck. They can't get laid. What, even if that mattered, but whatever. They can't get a
Sure.
date. You can't get a girlfriend. That becomes a sort of reason to stop everything else that they might have done. In some cases, it's as bad as just not, they just stop leaving the house. It's just sort of, it's as I pointed out, I've met 16-year-olds telling me it's over.
Mm.
Um, and that just seemed, maybe it's just my perception, very, very different. Perhaps also
Yes.
because
Yes.
back in the day, back in your time, back in my the audience was a different generation, also to some degree older. So a lot of guys had these experiences with women. Otherwise, the things you talked about in particular would not have resonated with them. If they were just sort of newbies and never had experiences,
That's
it would
correct. Yeah.
they wouldn't have been able to. What's he talking about? But now the new generation, they call them the Zoomers. They're so. I mean, they're. It's just 24/7 internet. I mean, literally from dusk to dawn. I meet guy. They have this robot alarm clock with a female voice that's tapped into Google that wakes them up. It's just never ending internet. So a lot of these formative experiences that you kind of need, and unfortunately, a lot of divorced men too, who had been through the ringer and difficult situations without life experience. I mean, that's the thing. Whatever you do with your experiences, whatever wisdom you might accumulate without experience, it's very difficult to accumulate wisdom. It's very difficult to interpret things. And so these days, if you're 15, 16, you're being exposed to all of this with no experience, you're just going to get bogged down by that. That was very different back then. I have a feeling that maybe at least the average viewer listener was older and more experienced. And these days, the manosphere is much bigger, and they're just much younger, and therefore a lot more impulsive. And they're beginning to lose their ability to see the forest for the trees in a way that was not the case earlier.
Yeah. I remember something an old boxing coach said to me. It was when I was a kid. And it came at a very critical time in my life. He said, one thing that young men can't see is what older man has lived. What an old man has lived, and it's very true.
Sure.
It's the thing is that what they can't see specifically is that our actions right now in this moment is going to dictate our future. They can't see that. It's hard to reach, and you're right. They have to go through critical periods of socialization in order to develop properly. But that's one aspect of it. So they can have a perspective, and they can have those experiences, and that's vital. But it's vital in terms of everyday socialization, in terms of operating in the everyday world, interactions with people. And you're right, a lot of them living on the internet. There's in August, I think it was August last year, in my home country, there was a young man named Mason. I can't remember his last name, but I only just heard about this story. But he was studying down at the University of Canterbury, and he was in a dorm room. So he had his own little room there in the college dorm. And he had essentially retreated from society completely. His mother died when he was 14, and his only real family was his stepfather. I don't think they'd been in contact for some time, but he'd basically withdrawn from study and all the rest of it, and just stayed in his room. They found his body after a month. They found it, there'd been so much decomposition that they couldn't determine the cause of death.
Hmm.
And he was 19, and he'd just completely withdrawn. And it's I've got to be honest, that's one of my fears for a lot of guys coming up today, that they're going to look at this content and use it as justification, not just to progress in life and all the rest of it, but it could end up completely isolating them and having profound health
Yeah,
risks, and
yeah.
it's
I know. I think exactly what you mean. I'd like to think so. I've actually addressed this, during your absence on several occasions,
sure.
in a sense. And I don't know if you're talking about exactly the same thing, but this would be my interpretation that yeah, the red pill, and this means so many different things these days, but the red pill traditionally, in the man sort of MGTOW context, the red pill is it has a lot of potential to do good, but it also has a lot of destructive potential. People call it red pill rage, but not just that. It can lead to a state of continual despair. I've seen it many times. I have a friend that tried the MGTOW way, but ultimately, he for whatever reason there's some maybe psychological dependencies that he just wants to live a quote unquote normal life. Married, kids, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Because it was too isolating or whatever reasons you might want to cite. But then there are even worse cases where all you get is sort of despair. Like, oh, if things are this way, then why bother? Why do anything? And yeah,
Yeah.
that's a potentially dangerous element that's always there. I actually have said, I keep on saying, I've gone on record publicly. I'm probably the only MGTOW content producer that doesn't think it's some sort of universal good to say, go your own way. I actually think that, you know, people are going to hear the message regardless, but maybe some guys, whatever hardship they might endure, are just better off in a more sort of dreamy, aspiration laden world of, I'm going to the conventional stuff. I honestly believe
Sure.
that after so many interactions and going on a decade of all of this stuff, and then, but on the other hand, I also worry conversely that okay, you can set somebody on that path, you just leave them be, unknowing and ignorant. But how much greater is their fall when it if and when it falls apart? Because the amount of
Yeah.
time invested, whether it's a marriage, relationships, whatever, and to realize then a lot of that was an illusion. A lot of that was
Yeah.
simply delusion, and so it's a sort of push and pull. At times, I think, yeah, for some people, and I won't be able to determine who those people are, it probably isn't a good idea. Um, but on the other hand, sometimes in the case of this friend of mine, you can call it cynical, but he's fully aware of female nature. I mean, even though he
Mm.
quote unquote wants this conventional thing, he has no illusions that women are lovey dovey. We really care about you types or anything like that. And so there's an awareness that he got from the MGTOW years that even going into whatever it is he's trying to do these days, that they have a certain psychology and they're going to view him a certain way. And it's not necessarily pleasant, but he's willing to accept that. And I think that's still better than pretending women and men are something that they're not. But I don't know if I was interpreting what you said correctly, because I'm not in your head. But I do think that at least that's been my interpretation over the years, that for some men, a lot of this stuff is incredibly damaging because after you imbibe, taken the red pill, whatever that means these days, it's really on you to do something. After the rage subsides, if it ever does, after all, you realize that essentially in a way, you're kind of screwed, but you don't have to be screwed in every way. And then it's
That's right.
on you to do something, to whatever it might be. As I mentioned, to even walk out the house a few times a week, take a walk. That's on you.
Yeah.
There's no Spetsnaz that can, coach you on that. I mean, maybe it'd be great if there were, screaming in somebody's ear to go take a walk, but you got to do. I mean, that's the stuff. Or you're a gym goer. I assume you still go to the gym these days.
Hmm. Sure.
You got to. There's just times when. The other day, I had no desire to go, and I was tired, but I kind of forced myself. It wasn't the most amazing workout. The things you got to do
Yeah.
to and that's where the momentum starts. But that's the problem. That's where I think it can the quote unquote red pill or this however you want to put it, enlightenment, awareness, it only can do so much. There's so much. The momentum really needs to start with you, and it needs to keep on pushing you. And you need to recognize that there's a life beyond that, and that there are so many things that you can still do that don't necessarily require that illusion or delusion that you used to believe.
Yeah, yeah. It's always have a saying. It's don't let the things you can't control you. That's always been one of my favorite sayings. And
Yeah.
with people, and everybody's the same, but I mean, they get caught up in resentment. It's a cycle of resentment. So they find themselves fluctuating between anger and fear. That's typically what happens, and they can manifest in a bunch of different ways. But most people just try to find quick fixes. They try to white knuckle their way through it. Try and soothe the anxiety, soothe the fear, the anger, all the rest of it. But it's all temporary fixes. But the root of the problem is always going to continue to fester, and that manifests as resentment. And if you're ingesting all this kind of stuff constantly, it can go that way. So it's anger, resentment, fear, they're all connected. So it becomes the cycle of being scared of the future, resentment over the past, and then you've got to factor in all the time that's been. But there's a lot of bad advice out there about how to deal with anger and resentment and all the rest of it. People come up with all kinds of bullshit, but can't say bullshit. Is that fine? I won't get paid. I won't get demonetized.
Well, I don't want to
Are you pausing?
be. Given your unique accent, I don't think it'll be too much of an issue. Go on.
Okay, I won't pick it up. All right, but yeah, I mean, it's people got to face the pain, face the resentment, and all the rest of it to heal it. So I mean, there's a lot of exercises. I won't go through the exercises, but things you can do so you can of who you resent, why you resent them, the negative ways it impacts your life, and the part you played in all of it. So you can find ways of coping and sort of navigating your environment moving forward. But a lot of that comes from experience. You've got to have those experiences, and unfortunately, a lot of them are negative. But that's how you build up resilience. You can't just opt out and then hope for the best. It doesn't work that way. So you want to ultimately transition into somebody who understands the source of your resentments, and transition into someone who can identify the source of the feelings and the areas that you want to work on. So you build up the resistance, you build up those strategies and all the rest of it, because you can't create positive change from a negative mindset. It's impossible. You can't do it. Yeah, people. I'm not saying people view themselves like this online, but a lot of people got to stop seeing themselves as a perpetual victim, and that's just a bit of tough love. I mean, you've got to be able to say that to people. When I used to work with inmates, we used to have it was very confrontational, but in a way that they felt safe and supported, so they could challenge other people's perceptions and their mindsets and all the rest of it. So you get positive peer influence. Then it becomes a positive influence, and they can navigate the prison environment better. They're in a more positive frame of mind. They develop empathy, compassion, so they can actually identify with the victims, see where they've gone wrong, and develop strategies from there. But I mean, people typically who have got resilience can handle this unfairness or perceived or actual real injustice. They tend to be able to catch their emotional response before it starts leading into that ongoing cycle. And it can lead into very obsessive thinking. And then you start to feel hopeless. You feel like you can't change anything because the game is rigged. And we've heard that saying. We were hearing it back in my day. But and people that have got resilience, they think rationally before they act. Right? And they can recognize the difference between what they can control and what they can't. And dwelling on unfairness and perceived or real injustice, it doesn't do anything to change it. It does nothing to change it. It just drains your energy. It just, it magnifies all your problems and your emotions, and it just keeps it more focused on those problems and all the problems that we can't control. So we can't get busy and proactive about finding solutions.
Yeah, and there's an important factor here. I would say one of the newer factors. It's not that things that I call them these echo chambers. They always have existed, but
Sure.
They've been amplified by various platforms. Discord's a good one. Various online forums always been around, but and I've seen this, when you get a bunch of guys, they're all in the same boat. They tend to stay lost at sea, and so they're sort of in a way. It's what I mentioned earlier. There's a sense of relatedness. Oh, well, you're going through this too. But at some point in time, they're so stuck in this rut, in this
Yeah.
mentality, in this mindset that, and because it's a feedback that they're constantly sort of feeding off of each other in this state of despair and I hate this word, hopelessness, that it becomes impossible for them to get. It's astonishing. You know, I have met some young men that are just. I know one guy that I've been encouraging now for months that he should
Yeah.
start some kind of channel about something or go out there. This guy's voice, I've almost never heard a voice like this. It's like something from the past. It's so unique
Right.
and amazing. Other people hear him, and the first thing they say, "Become
Got to go
read
on radio.
audiobooks. Gotta do something." And I've been
Yeah.
nagging him and nagging him and nagging him. And he's also quite smart, but he's stuck in a spot where you know he's got in a certain echo chamber, and he's kind of, this guy. I think he's 20. He's saying, I'm kind of resigned." You're 20. There's so many things
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
still
No.
do, and it's just. But unfortunately, the feedback he's getting up
Yeah.
until now,
Exactly.
even when he gets the sort of the new feedback, it's
Can you
just
hear
to
me?
reinforce it. Yes, I can.
Yeah. What I'd say, to a lot of the young men that I talk to, I tell them, we can't change the past. Uh, we can address what's happening now. We can't change somebody else's behavior if they aren't willing to change, but we can change how we respond. Now, a lot of the guys that I worked with, of course, the instinctual response is going to happen. That's going to happen. We have got no control over that, but we do have, control over stabbing someone or putting someone's head through a wall. We can control that reaction. So again, that's sort of an extreme example. It's on the extreme end, but you know, it, again, we can't let the things we can't control us. We've got to have compassion for ourselves. Recognizing that a lot of things are outside of our control, I think, is key. You've got to have acceptance of that. And the more you focus on having empathy and compassion and acceptance, it's the less room there is for anger. Again, it's shift in mindset, come from a positive space. You've got to be able to see the potential and the incentives. I know we've got that term that the carrot isn't worth the chase, but I'm not even talking about women. We haven't even touched women on this. Maybe I shouldn't have said that with the whole black bill thing, but um, can you?
Yes. Yeah. Hello. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we cut out there. No, I think what I say to a lot of these guys is, you've got to decide for yourself that it's not worth it. But by staying focused on injustice and all the rest of it, you're wronging yourself. You're doing damage to yourself. And I think, standing back, and it's hard when somebody doesn't have that kind of life experience. They've got to be able to separate the facts of the situation from the emotions that they're feeling, because they're getting trapped. They're having that instinctual response to perceived injustice or actual injustice. But they've got to have patience with themselves. They've got to have compassion for themselves, because they've got to move from one end of this process to the next. And like we've said, that they're missing out on a lot of stuff that we had early formative experiences, socialization, the rest that you've had relationships in the past, you've lived in different countries, you've done this, done that, you've seen things, you've lived it. And it's very hard for them, because another content creator that we both know, he said something quite profound. He said, it's like you're in a race, but you can't find the starting line. It's like, where's the starting line? I can't see it. There's a blind spot there. And I think that's what it's like for a lot of these young men. You can tell them things, but if they haven't lived it, if they haven't experienced it, there's a feeling of loss, but they don't know what they're losing out on.
Yeah. And
That's yeah.
there's another factor. It's again sort of the sexed up society, the ones who sort of hyper focus on on relationships or their inability to get them. And I often try to use a ridiculous metaphor, but imagine we lived in a society where, for whatever bizarre reason, pineapple ham pizza was the go-to food, but it cost $10,000 to eat one, so very few people could afford it, and everyone was talking about it. Pretty soon, whether you actually like pineapple ham pizza or not, you would think that you wanted that. And it's the same thing, really. But if you haven't experienced it, maybe one day you did sit down and have a pineapple ham. It's like, well, it's okay, but it's not that special. And I think that's the issue with some of the frustration related to women and sex, because the problem is it's very difficult to separate that mentality that you're trying to address um,
Sure.
from that, because everyone's talking about it, but they've not had the experiences. So that's the problem. Really, they don't have that experience, but everyone is saying that this experience is the thing you must have, and that just sort of builds
Right.
upon itself. And it would be the same thing with anything, pineapple ham pizza, take your pick. You could make up anything. If everyone were talking about it and saying that's the thing you need to pursue, but
Sure.
and get, but you've never gotten, and you also struggle to pursue it, that becomes a problem.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I was gonna say, but yeah, it was. I don't want to dismiss what these guys are saying. I want them to have the space and feel that they can say this. I'm not going to talk over them. I'm not going to talk at them. But if it's just coming across like that, that's not what I mean. It's wherever they go and then try to talk about this, they just get shouted down. They get branded as something, and it's patently unfair what they're receiving, and it's again everywhere they look, they're just taking a kick in the teeth. And it's hard for these guys. It's hard for them socially. It's hard for them all kinds of different avenues of life, because again they don't have the experience. But I liken it to a guy that I know. Now he's on the autism spectrum. So when he converses with people, whether it's in a work environment or a social environment, he calls it the pantomime. So he's had to learn it from scratch. So how to make eye contact, how to shake hands, how to say goodbye and good morning and all the rest of it, and all these little things. He's broken it down for me. He says if someone's talking to me and I nod, they're going to talk 2 to 3 times longer. And he's got a number that he counts down when he makes eye contact with someone. Then he looks away, then he looks back, and all the rest of it. So with him, he's got to learn everything by rote, because he can't see all the social nuances. And this guy, he's a good-looking guy. The thing is, so women approach him. So he's lucky in that respect. But because he's got a lot of social anxiety and all the rest of it. But this girl asked him back to her place the other week, and I think the line was, "Let's Netflix and chill." So he went back there and watched the movie. He said, "That was a good movie, thank you." Got up and left. So it's I can understand his sort of perspective on it, but he's had to work on that and work on that and work on that, and everything is an obstacle for him. But he's managed to build up networks of people. He's now part of a social group and also a bunch of different networking groups and all the rest of it. And it's because of the way his brain works. When he maintains eye contact with someone, it's almost like it's painful for him. It's not just anxiety; it triggers part of the brain. So he's got to go through all these little mazes and things that he doesn't understand. That's like 15 years being in that old world of just constant rejection and failure, and people looking at him like he's different, and not understanding him and all the rest of it. And it's like he's walking blind into things. But he's had to do all that work, because for him, he really didn't have a choice. So there was an incentive there for him. So maybe that's the difference. Maybe that's why he invested in himself like that and put in that work. But I can understand for a lot of guys today, they don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. They don't see any kind of worthwhile incentive to be chasing. Now, I don't think that's correct, but it's hard for them to see that.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think accepting limitations is a big factor here.
Mm.
E- even I would argue if that limit, if you really think, I don't know, maybe your heart's or your mind's desires to be in a relationship with a woman, if you really think that's the crowning achievement of human
No, no.
existence, I'd say you have another thing coming. But let's say you actually believe that,
Mm,
then if that's not possible, you need to arrange yourself with your perceived reality. If that's not the case, then do all the things that you can do. I mean,
mm,
that's the thing. I think oftentimes people want, well, it's obvious, people want things that they don't have. And it's easy in that process to forget the things they have and the things that they can do. And as you said to your earlier and many times in the back in the day, you got to be kind to yourself.
mm,
Um, I guess I'm a bit of a broken record on this, and I don't like talking about it too extensively. But I've had chronic sleep issues going on almost 25 years. Every day, is just random. There are days when I'm non-functional where I just say, you know what, I just got to accept it. And over time, when I was much younger, I used to rage about it and get angry. But maybe it's just getting older and just realizing that at this stage there's nothing I can really do about it. So I just kind of try to work with it. And when I'm more functional on a given day, that's great, and when not, it sucks. But so you got to just kind of accept limitations, but it doesn't mean you can't. You're limited to nothing. You just do what you
yeah.
can. But of course, in the reality we're living in now, where everything's on the online, and I plan on making a video more extensively about this topic. Everyone is happy, everyone's beautiful, everyone is getting laid, everyone is all these things. But if you actually took the time to step outside in the real world, you see that's not true. Not everyone is beautiful. Not everyone is ripped. Not everyone
Mm,
is happy. Not everyone. I mean, because of my sleep problems, I get out pretty early. I see people dragging their tired asses to work in the morning. They're not looking normal people. They're not looking like they're having a great time, really.
no, no.
Um, and so I think that's the new environment we're in. Is this again, gentlemen? I'll make a specific video about this topic of hyperreality, but what I call, or what's an author called hyperreality, where everything seems a certain way, but it's not actually that way. And I think
Mm,
when people lose their ability to live in real life, and I guess you're even far more than I am, much more tapped into what's referred to as IRL, in real life than I am. You were just living your life, which good on you. Probably the best thing anyone
yeah.
can do. And then you come back to
Yeah.
this, and you're just thinking, what the hell is this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess when I was making videos, I'd watch your work, I'd watch Barbarossa. Yeah, I didn't watch enough. I always said that I didn't watch enough content, but I came back and looking at the content, it's yeah. I mean, uh, there's good and bad. To put it that way. There's like I say, it's a great place for men to interact, and it's also got the toxic elements as well. And if there is such a thing as a philosophy with MGTOW, then it's always been about putting yourself first, and yeah, there's always been a positive message with that. So I've honestly never been able to determine what MGTOW is. I just it's for me it's just having those foundations, feeling empowered, having control of my life, and so on. That's as far as it goes.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's hard to look at a lot of the content, just scroll through it and go, well, that's just going backwards. Um, it's yeah, it doesn't seem to have progressed to. I guess from where I came from and the complete naivete on my part coming into it because I came from sort of clinical background. Um, when I was working with inmates and all the rest of it, these guys came from really harsh environments. But when they were in that room, um, they wanted to be engaged. Right? They wanted their time to be worth something. And they wanted to look forward to something positive. So they wanted a sense of optimism, and they had that. They wanted to build resilience. They wanted to have a purpose. They wanted to be happy. And it was good. They could come in and they could have this time. And what we established in that room was, peer support and all the rest of it, but we gave them a sense of normalcy. We created boundaries and all the rest of it, which is extremely comforting to someone who's come from that kind of traumatic background. But all these guys were working there with a real focus. And we got them focusing on all the good aspects of things, even if they're in prison. Everything's gone to hell. But get them focused on the strengths, identify those strengths, get them focused on gratitude. What was one good thing that happened this week? Get them focused on all that positive stuff so they can understand meaning, purpose. They can, have more positive interpersonal relationships. They can find the humor in things, find the happiness in things. And it gets them into a space where they start to be mindful of what is going right instead of what's going wrong. That's a shift in mindset. They put you into a positive space. And guys like that, that's the kind of concept that I thought this would transition into, say 10 years down the line. That's where I thought it was going. And it was, I thought the basis of it, or what it was going to transform into, was developing hope and meaning. Showing guys how to do this and how to network and build resilience and create a really purposeful, rich, full life. And women, relationships, all the rest of it, that's so far down the totem pole. It's, what comes first is you. It's always been about that. It doesn't seem to have gone that way at all. It's
Well,
just, in a lot of ways gone into like a funnel of negativity, which is like what Twitter is. And
yeah,
it's gone backwards.
being online is largely not a positive experience, really,
No.
for anybody. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But again, if all the world is talking about, the whole world is talking about something like, women should be sort of ideally the last thing to quote unquote focus on. But at the same time, it's difficult when everyone is, all you're hearing. I guess the difference, another difference, is that even if you could put aside those thoughts in a way that's, I guess, different from back in the day, because most people are just plugged in the internet 24/7, it would be very difficult to ignore everyone else telling you how you're supposed to focus on it. And I mean, I don't blame them. I understand, and it's definitely a new challenge. But yeah, they're really, at the end of the day, as I said in that video, and I've said many times, they still have to do something. They still have to do, even if the environment changes, even if everyone's talking about this, they still have to do really something, anything. Spetsnaz, having discussed all of this, what would you like to do? My impression is you're sort of, you wanted to maybe let everyone know what happened and what you think, but my impression is also that you're not quote unquote back. You're not going to be producing content necessarily. Um, Maybe I'm wrong about that, but if you were in if you were in today's world and you were producing content, or you wanted to, do you think anything would be fundamentally different, or would you just take the same approach?
It's, I'd feel more of a responsibility to be more. Um, I guess when I used to work in like prison environment, working younger men and all the rest of it, they used to test you because they wanted to see that you had a backbone, and they wanted that because they wanted the structure, and they wanted to respect you, and they wanted you to take control and all the rest of it, so that they could feel that you're strong enough to lead them. That's what they wanted, because they never had that. So, I used to deal with that. That's kind of the environment I understood. And, in that way, you could move into a role of mentor, to respect you and to be open to you, and only guide them in a way that would get them through like different phases of empowerment and all the rest of it. Um, but it's something that's sadly lacking with a lot of young men today. And in one way, you've got the internet, you can communicate with each other, and another way, it's just they're lost at sea. they're completely isolated. And like I brought up that case about that young man down University of Canterbury. I look at that and I go, that's got shades of hikikomori and all the rest of it, and I don't want a generation of men lost. They keep saying this phrase over and over again. It's over. I get it. It's a meme, all the rest of it. But sometimes, hey, are they joking? Or are they not? So I'm not saying are they going to self-harm or all the rest of it. I'm saying that they're taking action or inaction as of today that is going to have really kind of profound repercussions on their life moving forward. It's not going to bring them any kind of peace. And again, I look at a lot of MGTOW content makers and commenters and all the rest of it, and a lot of these guys are focused on their life and what they value and all the things, so they're very proactive about that. And it seems like a lot of those guys are in a really good place. I would always say that there's a difference between loneliness and social isolation. Loneliness is a mindset. So a lot of these guys have come to terms with a lot of things. They've come to that place and they're progressing quite nicely and all the rest of it. They're in a good place mentally. But I do have real valid concerns for these young guys. And, there comes a time when you're dealing with men and they don't want to be reached. Are they looking for excuses to give up? Or are they actually looking for reasons to continue? I'm not quite sure at this point. So, my channel was always sort of a little niche channel off to the side, I think. So I don't quite know at this point what I need to do to try and reach them, or if I could reach them, or maybe it's just an issue of time to see how things develop.
Do you still try to do something actively in real life, the life outside of the internet, towards that end?
Um, Sort of give you an indication of the industry that I've moved into. So a lot of these young guys that I interact with, I'm doing that, and I'm also part of different community health groups and stuff like that. So there's always that going on. And I do the boxing all the time, and I mentor the young guys and all the rest of it. So community outreach, things like that, I've always been involved with that. So that's always been important to me. But that's more hands-on. I like that. That's that's more practical approach, I think. And a lot of guys would benefit from that. I think a lot of these young guys today.
Well, that's probably a lot more
something
helpful than anything you can do online. The hands-on thing, it's very direct, and they're, everyone's up in their face, and and there's no real room for misinterpretation either. So you just, whether it's boxing or whatever it might be, there's also a doing. Men are, appreciate sort of action. So words can be interpreted one way or another, but if you're there to box or whatever it might be, run laps, then you're there to do that, and there's not much room for misinterpretation.
Yeah. I'd actually recorded a series of interviews I'd done with this is a while ago. I was going to release it on my channel, but I thought otherwise. Just at times, so I was just getting a lot of quite intense messages from people and all the rest of it. So I thought maybe it wasn't the right time. But and from walks of life, it wasn't necessarily MGTOW or red pill related. It was just these guys sort of relating their lives. I thought it could have been a benefit, but then I sort of reconsidered it. Again, it's people open to those perspectives. Do they feel it's in contradiction to, I don't know, their belief system or their ideology or what have you, or it's not construed to threaten or be at odds with your different perspective. It's their experience. But it seems anything you say today can be sort of deemed confrontational or challenging in that respect, and it's not intended to be like that.
Yeah, I think that even if you have the best intentions, people can certainly misinterpret that. And I mean, if you feel like you've done the good that you could do, then there's not much else you could do. I don't see any problem with with your absence per se. In fact, I mean, it seems like you're living a good life, and you're helping in a very immediate, direct way with the mentoring and the community activities.
Mm.
I mean, that arguably that's far more valuable than anything anyone could say online because it has a direct impact. It's not to say you can't have a direct impact online, but it's the impact is pretty variable. It can be good, it can be bad, it can be anywhere in between, and there's no way to sort of directly intervene there, and it's
Mm.
so I don't I totally understand your where you come from on this, and I think the audience, I would hope, would understand that too.
Mm.
Whatever whatever they appreciate about your content, that you've sort of moved on to a better place, so to speak.
Yeah, I feel so, and I think a lot of that is, due to your work and Barbarossa's work, especially as well. I mean, listening to Barbarossa the first time I listened to his post-feminism man, I'd stumbled across that from, God, I think a PUA vid.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of guys sort of stumbled across it, but yeah, that was like a sledgehammer across the consciousness. I'd never heard a man speak so directly and so
Yeah.
unapologetically
Well.
and reiterate and state things so proudly that I couldn't believe he was saying the exact things that I was thinking, and
Yeah.
he said them out loud. But, you go back and you watch something like that. Maybe the guys did today watch it today, and it wouldn't have that kind of
No,
impact because it's
not
been
not
so
only
much.
that, Spetsnaz, Barbarossa in that incarnation would not exist.
Mm,
Until, his channel wouldn't exist because they'd shut it down. Because the things he said, well, I mean, that's
that's
a
right.
separate issue, kind of, but
That's
yeah,
right.
the things he said were so forceful, so
Oh God.
they would be perceived as hateful and blah blah blah. But yeah, no,
Mm,
absolutely. I remember that. I remember just the thing about parasitism, and that
yeah.
that where he said, I want out. I don't know if you remember that. I want out.
Mm,
And
yeah, I remember that.
yeah, absolutely. Back in the day, that was tremendously impactful
Mm,
and powerful because yeah, you felt like you were being spoken to, and he just had the balls to
mm,
go out in there and say it. But I mean, Barbarossa, I think, in large measure, has moved on, and good for
seems to.
him in a similar way that you have. I'm not 100% sure of the details. I've not been in contact, but he's. I think he feels that he said his piece,
Mm,
and that's it. So I don't. I think there's nothing wrong fundamentally if a person feels that they've made their contribution to just move on. And I mean, you'll always have the legendary status. You say it's niche, yes, perhaps, but the things that you said and the emotions that you inspired, um, that will always have its place and always be unique. I think the only real shame, unfortunately, is that it's probably archived someplace, but maybe some of it would be helpful to some guys these days, but it's all sort of gone, you know?
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's just I felt, yeah, was I contributing or was I hurting? And if I couldn't be sure, should
Yeah.
that channel stay up? I wasn't certain.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think people would understand that. But I mean, I mean, ultimately, if the original message, let's say, of MGTOW was just doing your thing on your own terms,
Mm,
it seems to me that you're sort of the embodiment of that.
yeah.
You you've you have your legacy, so to speak. You've made your statements. You left your message, and you're living. I guess you could say in sort of the good life as far as you can judge it to be.
Mm,
I'd like to think it's a similar case with Barbarossa, and
yeah.
there's not only nothing wrong with that. It's probably ultimately better than the alternative, because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, could you really, to be fair, I've always wanted to help men, but I'm also kind of, my channel is not just about that. There are topics I like to explore about the world, and it's
Sure.
in part analytical, and that's part of the reason why I keep on going. There are new things to be sort of introspected on and what have you. But alternatively, I just think there probably isn't anything better than having a quote unquote real life and being out there. Because as someone who spends a lot of time on the internet, I could say that most people I encounter do not have fulfilled lives. And if they did, they wouldn't be online nearly as much as they are. So, you're doing it right, as is likely Barbarossa, wherever he is and however well he might be doing. I'd like to think he's in a good spot too, and decided that he said his
Yeah.
piece. And yeah,
Well, I think it's it's. I think it's always been said. You may have coined it. I don't know, but it's like this space online was never meant to be a destination. It's just
yeah,
part of the journey, and that's fine. And I don't think Neo actually ever escaped the Matrix. I don't think he ever left the Matrix. I think he adapted it. He worked within the Matrix to make it work for him.
yeah,
That's always been my approach. So my intention was never to opt out at all. My intention was to connect, to work on myself, and that was always my goal.
yeah. And you sound like you're just genuinely doing well, in a way that, frankly, most denizens of the internet I encounter are not. Um, I, I've seen all kinds of iterations of this, but people going online to find something that clearly is sort of missing in their own lives. I've observed online religious communities, even though I'm not a believer myself, do this where most of the time they spend, or a great deal, many of the time is online because they can't say find the religious community they'd like to have in real life. I see it with FAs. I see it with all kinds of things. So broadly, people just feel that they're lacking something in real life that is driving them to spend inordinate amounts of time online, which is in turn kind of warping to varying degrees their mind. And I have to say that for better or worse, you have a unique talent. I mean, you were always kind of living in the pulse of life type of guy, and I'm not ashamed to admit to far more than I am. Um, and I'm not sure how I don't know if you can transmit that. That might be a unique quality that Spetsnaz has. That I just not sure what to because yeah, that is something that
Yeah.
people have unique qualities, and then there's the thing we talked about with the experience. I don't know how to you go through certain experiences, you make your peace with that. I mean, yeah, I'm not. It reminds me of that the Fight Club scene. Well, Fight Club's actually sort of being founded, and Brad Pitt's Tyler Durden's giving this speech about we've been not lied to and all this stuff, and at some point in time you don't really want to, at least the energy you want to your energy output is no longer really directed to fighting, and you just kind of want to move on with things. And
Yeah.
I certainly don't. I guess I had a phase of red pill rage at some point in time, connecting the dots. But in time, I mean, I can't remember that sort of thing. Just getting upset about women. I mean, is not something that I ever really feel. And when I hear about some experience or encounter something, it's just I just nod my head. And, yeah, that's just women. You know.
Yeah.
Um,
I've always maintained that every man has value, no matter what he's done, where he's come from. Every man has value, and he should never compromise that. And if someone or something in your life is not adding value in a meaningful way to your life, they shouldn't be in your life.
mm,
It should not be a part of your life. Absolutely not. And one thing I'd say to men is, it, it, what works for me has always been, moving through different social networks. Like, for me, it's a very practical, step by step approach, and it's the way that I like to do it. It's approaching people and asking for their input. Like for the the gym, we both do the gym. When I went in there, I went in with the intent of finding out how to do things. So I needed a mentor. So it's like, show me how to do this, because coming from a pretty rough background and all the rest of it, and getting into boxing, that showed me that men were willing to work with me, show me how things were done, and I liked that kind of mentorship, and that was very important to me. So I've had that all through the different networks that I have, and it's just step by step, and it's and you're not taking up their time. It's not an inconvenience for them to put them in that position. They like being in that position. They want to help you. You're adding value to them. They're adding value to your life. So people say that things will get better. Well, they won't. Not unless you actively work at making it better. That's what I want to say to these young guys, and I do all the time. You've got to take these little incremental steps, and it's tough, but it gets you to a better place. It gets you to a more positive mindset, and it makes changes. All those little incremental changes. Is that going to get you laid? I don't know. I mean, the world's gone mad. The world's insane. I'm not going to sit here and try to debunk the black pill or Tinder statistics. Or I can't. And it is what it is. I'm sorry. What can I say? And I'm not trying to make light of it. It is what it is, and that's horrible for a young man to go through that. That they're having fun. I'm not. They're having sex. I'm not. And then they get stuck into this spiral, and I understand that, and they should be able to state that out loud, but it's not their fault. I don't want to sound like Robin Williams and Good Will Hunting, but it's again, accept what you can change, accept what you can't, but it shouldn't impede your life or you finding value in things, finding value in yourself you enjoy being a part of. And maybe a sausage fest if you go and join a boxing gym or what have you, or whatever you're going to do. Yeah, okay, but you're building up those little networks, and it's going to build onto other things, and opportunities are going to arise because you're holding those doors open. You're opening those doors. You're the only person that can. So it's
yeah. I think it's good that you missed out on the black pill. You don't, these days I am known as the Lord of Black Pills. Just saying. I don't intentionally try to be, but no, but absolutely. I mean that's the thing. Things can lead to other things, and maybe through networking and doing various things, they will get some dates or whatever. But being able to do something as opposed to nothing, and at the stage a lot of these guys are at, that's kind of what they need to do. Some of these guys literally just need to. The best exercise they can get is going for a walk for 45 minutes, like leaving the house.
And it's like and I'm not going to downplay it and say it's just these guys, because a lot of these guys are very they've got a lot going on. They're educated and they've got hobbies and they do things and they do everything they can but they're still missing out on this component of their life. So it's not just I'm not going to say these guys go and get a haircut and spin plates. I mean that's come on. A lot of these guys have really got their stuff together, but they're missing this one component, and that is out of their control. But speaking from experience, do they really want to dumpster dive into all that toxicity? Because it's brutal and it's painful, and you're just going to devalue yourself in the process.
You mean the women's, yes?
Yeah. It's. I mean, I haven't been in a relationship, God, in years. But I try to keep active and all the rest of it. I know.
Well, here's a spin.
Occasionally
Here's a spin you. I mean, just because of how crazy the internet is. I mean, I don't think it'll reach it, but and in some ways it is that way. Imagine if the new gold standard were if you weren't a multimillionaire, like your life is just it's over. I only make a couple of $100K. Yeah, it's over. But you laugh. But we're kind of moving in this direction where it's so insane that I guess I can only have a small house and a kind of decent motorcycle and car and a dog, and I only get laid 3 times a week, and it's over. But this is it's just that the superlative is becoming just this. I've thought about this. I have this thought occasionally play
Yeah.
around. I don't think it'd ever go there necessarily that extreme, but it kind of is moving in that direction. And that might not be the final destination ever, but it's just everything just being the superlative that you have to live for. And if you don't have it, then just give up, and don't do anything. You know, I'm not in a particularly great spot in my life now, where I'm particularly the flat I'm living in, and some other things. But to me, that just incentivizes me more to like get out of the house. I wanna exercise more. I want to do various things. I try to do things to get my mind off current obstacles and things like that, because that's just, to be honest, that's just going to make my life easier. The more I focus on the difficulties I'm having these days with my living situation or my health situation, the more I get dragged down. So I just try to do all the things that kind of push me away from that I can. And that has just a cascade effect of just being in a state of equilibrium rather than in a state of disequilibrium. But yeah, I mean, you can push this game as far as you want to the point where, oh, if I'm not, and there are people like that. I've encountered. I know a guy online. I don't see him very often, and he's quite serious. He said that if by 30 he's not a multimillionaire, he's going to off himself. And he's still work every day. He's doing this sort of online hustle and trading and whatever. I don't see him that often, but he's quite serious. Last time I checked in on him, I think he was 26 or 27. Well, I got a couple more years. I might make it. Like these ridiculous.
Got to hit that number.
Yeah,
It's all
yeah,
about that number.
yeah. These people do exist, and it's extreme. But yeah, I mean that's kind of where we're at. I instead of trying to enjoy the things that are available, I have a couple of close friends. I have a close friend, and he's in a very rough living situation in a very unpleasant country. And he often falls into the trap of just obsessing about his circumstances rather than just looking at some of the things that are kind of on the up end. And I get it, because that's the thing. At the end of the day, you got to do what you can. Not
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't do what you'd like to. So basically, you got to do what you can. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
So I don't know. I think you've. I mean, would you like to add anything or?
I think I've said my piece for now, but talking to you and having a look at the content online, it's sort of, yeah, it's piqued my interest again. I'm sort of keen to see how things develop and see what
Yeah.
direction things
Well,
are heading in.
you're always. You're all. I'm happy to be a platform for the epic voice of Spetsnaz. If you ever want to have something, or ever have something else to say, or you think you could
Sure.
contribute something. But I think living real life is a good thing, and it's something we should ideally all aspire to. So in that sense, you're a bit of a role model.
Oh well, I'm flattered. Yeah, at least you didn't take a dig and make me cringe like you
No,
used to.
no, no. Did I? Anyways, I hope at least the audience. I know I do have a lot of old school people there. You were asking about Spetsnaz. This is a quirk of fate. I did not, this is providence. The gods intervened, and I was fortunate enough to be the recipient of the gods' mercy here. So, yeah, I hope
You're the original. You're the original OG.
Eh, not really. I'm just a fossil, but I'm glad Spetsnaz was here to offer his point of view, and I hope you get some value out of what he said now, as you used to get value out of what he said back in the day. And perhaps this is not the last time we hear from him. Perhaps not. We'll see. But everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope this was a pleasant surprise, and thank you, Spetsnaz, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.